people that are really interested in watching this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I've got. I mean, we have a session here which has to do with the stage presence. You know, how we behave on stage, how that influences the message, how that makes the message easier to understand or sometimes less easy to understand. And obviously, we're going to talk about what, you know, as the title of the workshop says, it's the do's and don'ts, things that we should do and things that we should stop doing. And it
Mm-hmm.
could become apparent. I'm not going to say we should stop doing this, we should start doing that. I think it will all become apparent as we go along. It's not that hard, I think. Now, what I would like to basically to start with is why we should be concerned about this. I mean, I think we've all seen situations where we've seen really good presentations when it came to content, but of course the speaker or the presenter didn't really care very much about the. Oh, there we've got somebody else joining us. Let's see, who's this? Let's see. Oh, David Cortes from Vitoria. How, David? How are you? Hope we can. Doesn't have a video, no micro, but they can hear us, so that's fine. So let's carry on. Hi, David. So I think the problem here is we're concerned about one thing, that when we are on stage, whether on a real stage or when we are doing a presentation, that the way that we move, the way that we speak, and the way that we move our hands, everything, you know, will become a part of. We can call it a show, we can call it a spectacle, or we can call it a performance, or we can say, well, it's not really that important because we think that we should really focus just on the content. Now, I think not many people in Toastmasters have said that. I mean, we do understand that content is extremely important, but the way that we pass on that content, the way that we speak and the way that we move is also extremely important. This is a question of form that will help content. Rather than focusing just on content and then putting the form totally aside, we should actually acknowledge that the form actually helps us to make the message get across. So sometimes we fail to connect with the audience emotionally. So we can be there just talking, saying one thing after another, and then we don't really make, you know, a point of making this really exciting and really interesting to everyone. Sometimes we're too tense, too stiff. So for example, you could be standing on a huge stage, but you just use a very small space where you're going to move or not move at all. Or you can stay behind the podium, which doesn't help as well, as we know, right? Or we could just wander about aimlessly. We could just be talking nonstop for hours. Well, sometimes, you know, we diverge a bit, we digress, and then we have to be reminded sometimes to come back to where we were. That doesn't help as well. We don't know what to do with our hands. For example, I mean, our hands is like, we become so self-conscious about our hands that we don't know whether we should put them in the pockets, where we should cross our arms. We don't really know what to do with them. So what should we do? And we also tend to repeat many movements, you know, whether we're talking about the actual voice, and we know some of those, you know, those verbal crutches. We also tend to repeat many movements which have to do with your hands or with the way that you move forward and back on a stage. And these are things that will definitely stop you. If you don't do it well, they will definitely stop you from making a good performance, making a good impression on stage. Now, I'm talking on a stage on a very, you know, a very broad way. We're not talking about a literal stage. We're talking about anywhere where you make a presentation. It could be anywhere. It could be right here, right? I mean, if I stayed right here without moving, just moving my lips for an hour and a half or 2 hours, I think that would be quite boring, correct? But if I move a little bit more, if I am completely at ease, if I think I own the situation, then it becomes more easier for me to move and to make sure that, you know, I get this bridge, this connection with the public. So what happens is that if these things happen, we feel bad because we know that we could have been better. The public isn't excited whatsoever, so they won't be convinced about our arguments. The idea and the proposal, the argumentation, whatever we want, that is the objective that you want to attain by that presentation or that speech, will fail. It doesn't carry. And that's a huge expense when it comes to time, when it comes to effort. You've done a presentation, you've done your best. Well, you think it was your best, But if you just focus on the component of the content and not on the form, which is the stage presence, then what's going to happen is that time that you've just spent is going down the drain. I mean, of course, it will, time is time, it's just gone. But the result of that presentation will never come back. So you will have invested a lot, something that of your time, which you haven't been able, will never be able to recover anyway, but you won't have any advantage whatsoever about just focusing on the content whatsoever. So in 2 words, we fail, and that's it. We just fail. And, I don't know about you and I mean, I know we all learned about failure. We've all been told, yeah, failure is okay. But of course, we'd rather avoid it. So I guess we all can fail once, but then we learn and then we do something different. We can't keep doing the same things. So what are we talking about here? I'm talking about 5 different main things, but there'll be a few more that you'll see some subjects. And we're talking about here about emotions. We're talking about your voice, about your body, about your eyes, and about your focus. If you think about these 5 things, this is what is a presentation. Apart from, of course, the content, apart from the, if you have slides about the slides, that's not the thing. We're just going to focus on stage presence here. Now, before I go on, if by any chance, if you have any questions, and because there are only currently 3 of us, feel free to interrupt, just switch on your microphone and interrupt and ask any questions you'd like. I'm here for you. I'm not here to just give you my thing. I think most of all, this has to be useful for participants. Now, I know there are not many participants right now, but people who are watching this later on, I'm sure they will also benefit if you get involved. So don't worry, you don't have to raise your hand, just switch on the mic, just wait for a pause and then just interrupt, and that's absolutely fine, okay?
Yes, Norberto, I was just thinking that you mentioned the emotions, voice, eyes, and focus.
Yes.
I'm missing one, I think.
So there's emotions, voice, body, eyes, and focus.
Body, eyes, and focus. And I was wondering why do you take emotions out of as one item out of body, eyes, and everything else?
What item? Sorry, I don't understand the question. Can you repeat?
Yeah, the question is, what body language? I suppose that's what we know. Yes. Verbal communication. That's what we're talking about. Focus meaning how you present your body, your voice, your emotion, and your eyes all together.
It has a lot to do with what you want the public to see when it comes to content. You'll see later on when you get to the focus. Okay, carry on.
Okay. Yeah, so carry on.
Sorry, you want to say something? Yeah. So let's start with emotions. I mean, emotions shouldn't really be about this. I mean, if you're talking about body language, you think, well, what have emotions to do with that? I mean, emotions is a totally different thing. I agree in principle, but at the same time, what you really want to do when it comes to your stage performance is to excite people, is to create some enthusiasm. And you can only do that if you start from the very beginning, which is, what kind of emotions do you want to see in the public? Would you like to see the public to admire you as a leader? Okay. Would you like the public to admire the idea and think, I really want to buy this, go into this idea, and I'd really like to be a volunteer in this organization? Maybe. Would you like, what would you like really the public to do in the end? Because if you do that, if you think about what you would like the public to do, of course you have to think about yourself. What are you going to make? How are you going to start? Because if you want to see laughter in the public, you have to be funny. If you want the public to admire you, you have to do something really admirable. If you want the public to think that, they were going to be really enthusiastic about an idea, you have to be enthusiastic about that idea as well, right? I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? But we forget this. It's quite rare, I would almost say impossible, that if you would get a reaction from the public that doesn't start with you. So if you want the public to smile, you have to smile yourself. I mean, you don't have to be funny in the sense of humor. We'll see that in a second. But if you smile, if you become a very agreeable person, then of course the people will smile back at you. So if you are on stage and you think that people are becoming bored and nobody looks at you and they're becoming, there's a lack of energy, well, you have to start it yourself. You have to do it. You can't blame the public. You have to do it yourself. So there's another thing that we have to have in consideration here, which is there are many people. I don't know very much about the Spanish case, but I know very much about in Portugal. This happens very frequently, which is that many people, according to the context, they will think that we need to be very serious. Serious for people sometimes results in actually being boring. So if you are in a company, if you think, oh, I need to talk to the CEO, I need to make a presentation to the board, to the executive commission, then we think, oh, we have to be, in a suit and tie, very formal. I can't really stand out too much because, what's really important is the idea, and that is the first step in the direction of tediousness, of being boring. And believe me, if you are boring in front of these people, or anyway, if you are boring in front of anyone, people will be bored. It's obvious, right? But it just means that you won't be able to make your points across. The points won't get across to the other side of the public. So the first lesson I would give here is to be passionate. Now, you can all say, oh yeah, we have to be passionate. Yeah, so how are we passionate? Well, you have to be passionate by making sure that you prepare yourself well, that you have enthusiasm in your voice, that your voice has lots of, it's not just what's it called, a boring voice. You have to make sure that you put that passion into everything you say and how you say it. You have to make sure that if you have slides, if you have PowerPoint slides or keynotes, that they will also be interesting. And rather than having too much information, is that they will put the right information in front of the public. So sometimes it's kind of difficult because you might think, oh, Norberto, it's not that easy because I'm not really passionate about this. Well, this is something I can't help right now because, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So if you're not passionate about your line of work, maybe you should consider changing your line of work, or, it's your life. You do with it whatever you want. Or sometimes you actually receive a presentation from somebody else and you have to go instead of that person to a presentation and do it. And in that case, well, I don't know, fake it till you make it, I guess. But you have to make sure that you have to come across as a person of passion in order to make people also passionate about what you're going to talk about. Because again, in the same way that you'll never see something in the public that you don't start with yourself, it's the same thing with passion. If you're not passionate, people will not be passionate as well about what you're talking about. So you're all wasting your time, really, unless your objective is being boring, of course. Now, there's one focus here. There's somebody else said, and it was not Maya Angelou. There's this American poetess, a poet that used to say that they may forget what is said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. It was actually not her, it was somebody else. Who cares? Remember this. They may forget what is said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And who are we talking about? Are we talking about speakers or presenters, people who are giving a speech or making a presentation? And when you talk about them, they is the public. And it's really funny because our brain plays tricks with us. Our brain is, even if it's completely focused during a presentation, when we finish the presentation, the level of remembering just goes down like this. It just shuts down. And you know what happens because of that? Basically what happens is that you're going to be forgotten. Your theme will be forgotten. And because it's forgotten, you're going, in a while, nobody will know who you were. Nobody, probably, if you're lucky, maybe the people will remember you after, a month or two. But most times, if you're not passionate, if you're not focusing on these aspects, you can be sure that if you are in an event all day long, and if you are, for example, the first person in a session or a panel of speakers, in the next coffee break, people will not remember who you are. And that's serious. If you focus just on content, I can assure you that's going to happen. Or at least there's a high probability of that happening. Now, how can we revert that? Because how can we kind of hack the brain of the public in order to make sure that you were not forgettable? Well, there are many ways, and this is why we're here. It's precisely to ensure that people who will remind themselves, remember your message and who you are. That's why we're here, to actually add some passion and some interest to what otherwise could be a boring presentation. Now, one thing that you really want to do if you want to get your idea across, of course, is you want to be persuasive, right? I mean, if you have, for example, a proposal to, like, for example, say a commercial presentation where you're trying to make a proposal to a client, and the client at the end, you'd like the client to say yes to whatever you are proposing. Say, for example, you are proposing a new investment in, I don't know, maybe building a resort in a new island, or, for example, starting a new IT project that will implement blockchain in your organization. Anything you can think of. If you want to get your idea across, you need to be persuasive. And I'll tell you what, you will not be persuasive if you just focus on facts, right? Now, most people will respond to either one of these three things: facts, numbers, and stories. This is how you become persuasive. Now, stories will become probably emotional. It's just one example. And some people will love stories. They can't do without a story. However, some other people will think, well, a story isn't enough. A story is just one case, but I need 10,000 of these cases. I need 1 million of these cases in order to make a more pragmatic and a more, I would say, you know, a more detailed proposal. Just one story isn't enough. Okay, then give them numbers, big statistics, but also give them facts, as in maybe something that, you know, people haven't realized yet. It could be just one piece of a number of statistics or one part of the story. But if you give them also just facts, like, this is true, I've seen this, and you can see this, and everybody can see this. So what can we do about this? So you can, with these three things, you become quite persuasive, and you can become very, you know, can use the power of your emotions to get all these ideas across. Again, stories, facts, and statistics and numbers, right? So think about this. This is how you become persuasive on stage. So when it comes to qualities of people, we've talked about passion, we've talked about persuasion, but what other qualities do we think we admire? I mean, Manjal, do you want to risk any qualities that you think people admire in speakers? Would you like to contribute a little bit with that?
I think humor.
Humor, fantastic, exactly. Anything else that you think people would like?
I think people like something that reminds of their lives, you know, that I suppose that is part of the story, possibly.
Exactly. David, are you there? Do you want to share something?
Yeah, of course.
Go on.
I think it's very important, the credibility of the speaker. Yeah. I think this point is very, very important. If the speaker has credibility, you already have won a lot.
You know, that's a fantastic example, David. You know why? Because credibility will underscore everything we'll be talking about in the next hour. Because too much. Right? I mean, if you are talking too much and you know, doing all these weird gestures in the air, I mean, of course, it depends on the context. If you are running around in the stage, and if at the same time you have a very serious presentation, then, you know, these things don't match up. They don't add up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be careful. Yeah. So what I usually say, I mean, even now in Malaga, in October, I did a quick workshop on this, which is something that really I'm concerned with, is that if we, of course, apply everything that we hear at Toastmasters in for example, a professional setting, or, you know, in education or in other contexts, it might not work, because people in Toastmasters are used to expect a show, and that's good. I mean, for that context, it's perfect. But we have to be careful that some of these things, if we apply them in other contexts, it might not work, precisely because they might underline your credibility. So you have to be very careful about that, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give you a few others. For example, one of them is courage. You know, if you are brave enough to make a difficult proposal because you think this is the right thing to do, you know, and of course, respecting who the other people are. I mean, for example, if you are, again, giving that example of, I propose that we should not go ahead with this investment. I mean, I know that you are all expecting this investment to go on, but I have a few reasons why, and why, you know, behind my decision or behind my reasoning, and I would like to hear them so that you can make an informed decision. You know, if you do this, you're really putting yourself out there, right? I mean, it's a huge risk sometimes. If you go against people's expectations, that means that you are brave, that you are courageous. So that's a good thing to do, I guess. Another one, as you said, credibility, I say also authenticity. I mean, I guess that credibility is the end game. You know, that's one of the most important, you know, qualities that we should have. How do we get there? You know, by being authentic. I mean, if you are credible because you are authentic in your argumentation, that you're making a sound judgment, right? So that helps, I think. Another one, as you said, good humor, you know, optimism. You know, people will like to hear someone who is an optimist, even if that means that sometimes we change that definition of it. I mean, an optimist isn't necessarily someone who will believe anything. An optimism, I think, is someone who will be able to, you know, to listen and to be positive about things, about the outcome, even if you decide not to do something that, you know, that will be for the best, right? Instead of being, oh, it's all going down the drain. And so, I mean, nobody wants to hear someone completely, you know, almost whining all the time and, you know, being boring. So being an optimism also has a lot to do with being good humored and being a passionate person, being enthusiastic about something. I'll also give a couple of other examples here. For example, what about control? You know, the need that we need to show people that we are in control of things, right? That, you know, things are not completely out of control. I guess that depending again on the subject, on the context, it's a good thing to show to other people that you are in control of things. That, I mean, and that's a good quality that you have. Like, you are a good leader, that you are a good manager, that you know how things are going, that you are informed, both because you decided to be informed. I mean, if you are proactive, as in when you are reactive, and then you can, if you don't know something, that you'll be able to learn about it quite quickly and be able to return. That's control, I think. Another one is seriousness. You know, it's the fact that I guess some people confuse being serious in two different ways. One thing is being serious as in someone who is cool, calm, and collected, and can give right answers to the right questions, and who can be, you know, very persuasive. And that's someone who's serious in the sense of a good serious. There's also serious in the sense of someone who's boring, right? That person is so serious, is so uptight. I mean, we have to be careful about how we choose to be seen. For example, it's quite possible that in some contexts, it is quite important that for some people that they will be boring. I mean, I don't want to use some you know, have preconceived ideas, but it's quite important that, for example, if you are a lawyer or if you are an accountant, that if you are too, you know, flamboyant, that people will just stop listening to you, right? I mean, I'm not entirely sure what I'm saying, but I'm sure there must be some contexts where you have to choose exactly how you want to be seen, and that is very important. I mean, you have to start yourself, right? Why am I saying all these things? Because I think that all of these will become very important for everything that I'm going to say about the voice and the body movement and about the focus. They will all be about a proper mix of these things, about how to act on stage, right? Any questions before we go on?
It's okay.
Great.
Perfect.
So I'll start with something that I haven't said yet. Well, I have mentioned it, but I didn't say it was one of those big 5 things. And I'll start with humor. And why am I starting with humor? Because I think we've all heard the old adage that says that if we make a small joke in the beginning of a presentation, it will kind of break the ice and then we can move on, right? Have you heard about this before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have to be careful. I mean, it's not that wrong, but we do have to be careful about what kind of humor we're talking about. Because it depends. I mean, if you are making a joke that somebody has heard before, then people, oh, okay, it's an old joke. Or be careful, because some jokes, they are made at the expense of someone. There could be a joke about women, about blonde women, or about a minority that people would prefer respecting. And sometimes the way that people, the way that jokes are made, is that they make fun of other people, right? Now, you don't even have to have someone in the audience to be one of those people in order to feel that they feel offended. No, I mean, I would feel offended by, even by proxy, by somebody else, if I had, a story about, or a joke, a bad joke about, an ethnic group. I would feel bad. I wouldn't like it. So we have to be very careful, because people are becoming very, very sensitive to all kinds of humor. They become even more sensitive to senseless humor, or at least humor that is kind of outdated. So we have to be extremely careful not to go into that kind of humor. So what I'm suggesting is, if you want to do humor, whether it is in the beginning or in the middle or at the end, any time in a presentation, that there is one focus of your humor, which is yourself, right? So if you make fun of yourself, again, it depends on the context, but if you make fun of yourself, that will help people, that will definitely help the ice to break, because then people will laugh, definitely. I mean, if you are feeling confident enough that you're making jokes about yourself, people will notice that. That adds credibility rather than undermining your credibility. If you don't take yourself too seriously, people will notice that. People will think, oh yeah, of course. And sometimes, without even knowing, the speaker knowing this, the public will think, oh, that's happened to me as well. Oh my God, that time. So people will relate to this as well. I mean, none of us has had such a unique experience that nobody else has had in the past. So there's always something in common, and people will relate to that, even if the focus of our humor is ourselves. Now, I'm not talking about jokes in themselves. When I'm talking about humor, I'm talking about a story that's happened to you, and it could be something really short, something, usually it's about setting up an expectation, then shortly afterwards going against, something else has happened, so I was expecting this and this to happen, and then something completely different happens. That's where humor comes from. It's about, expectations which are not only met or unmet, actually, it's expectations that are completely blown away. So if you think, oh yeah, I got there and everything was mine, and I felt completely in control of the situations, and then this happened, and I was completely, oh my God, and everything went so wrong after that. I mean, if you want to do that kind of humor, I can assure you that it's much more likely that the humor will carry than humor when you're making fun of other people, right? But you can't be obvious. I mean, for example, everybody has a story, or most people have a story about something. For example, oh, at that time when the airline company lost my luggage when I was traveling to China or to, anywhere. Or that time when I went to a country and then I spent the whole time in toilets because I couldn't stand the food. I mean, come on, we've all been through that. It's too obvious, right? So that humor will have to be smart. It will have to be something that people will relate to, of course, but it can't be too obvious about that. The other thing that's very important about humor is that usually if you're making fun of yourself, it's not like you're making fun as in, you're not putting yourself on a pedestal. It's quite the opposite. It's like you're thinking very highly of yourself, and then something happens, and then you think you have to revise that in the lower expectation. Because remember, if you are already in the center of attention in a presentation, and you already have the attention of everyone, don't put yourself on a pedestal. That doesn't work. People hate other people who think, oh, I'm the best person in the world to do this and this and that. I'm a world specialist in doing that and that. I went around the world in a solo trip on a sailboat. Come on, I mean, it can be interesting up to some point, but after a while, if you're talking about too much about yourself, that doesn't work. So you have to be careful about where to end that humor. You have to be aware that, how the people will respond to that. Yeah. Do you have, Mahel or David, do you have any stories that you'd like to share about, times that you've made a joke, or when it worked or it didn't work?
Well, for me, to be honest, it's a very difficult thing to use humor in my speeches because I'm quite a serious person. So for me, it's not easy, you know, to use humor. But I think it's a powerful.
Sorry, go on. I'll let you finish.
No, I think it's a powerful way of making the speech more catching and interesting for the audience.
Yeah. You know, I'll tell you what. In my experience, people who are serious and who look serious to the crowd, you can make the best jokes precisely because people aren't expecting that. It's totally unexpected. So if you portray yourself as that person, because you are that person, but then you tell them, I wouldn't say again a joke, but a piece of humor, something that was funny that happened to you, and even if you don't laugh, it will be fine, and people will appreciate that. It's a question, of course, of rhythm, about punchline and everything, but it's something that on Toastmasters there are a few advanced manuals about humor speeches and entertaining speaker and so on. And those are quite interesting. And it's there. I mean, I myself, that's how that was my self-image a few years ago. And then I started doing some humor, and I think, this is not that hard. I can do this, especially while you're not laughing at your own jokes. That's the epitome. The top level of self-deprecating humor is that you're making jokes about yourself and you still don't laugh. That works so well. Believe me, you should try that. But I would suggest if you try that, try it first at Toastmasters, and then go to a real life situation outside of Toastmasters to do it.
Okay.
I said humor when you asked me before because I think it's the most difficult thing. I at home maybe I can make jokes, so I can do that. I can do everything that you have said. But in front of the audience, I find it very imposing, and I don't know how to do it. And I think it's the most difficult thing. I can move myself. I can use my voice. I can do many of those things. But humor is a subject I can't possibly go on with it. I find it very, very difficult.
Yeah. That's how I found myself about 3 or 4 years ago. And then I did a couple of those old manuals called Entertaining Speaker and Humorously Speaking, and things changed. I mean, I'm not doing humor all the time, but I learned a lot from that. I mean, how to set expectations and then go the other way around, using personal stories to, that could be funny, and use them, exaggerate them sometimes, and that can be really funny. If you do that, you'll start seeing a different person. You'll see a different person hiding under your shell, and you'll find that person will sometimes want to come out in speeches, and especially in some serious situations, humor is amazing. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's one talk a TED Talk. Actually, I'll give both examples will be about TED Talks. There's one TED Talk with Ken Robinson. He's an educator. He's the I think a leader at the Royal Ballet in London, or Royal Opera, something like that. And I think his talk is one of the most watched in the whole world. I think it's like 55 or 56 million views. And it's funny because it makes lots of jokes, and sometimes they're self-deprecating jokes. Sometimes they're actually making fun of his own family members. But the funny thing is that those jokes, those stories, they will actually be inside more serious matters. So it has a very serious subject that he wants to talk to us, and it doesn't leave humor completely out. Which is, when we are serious, you think, no, I should be serious, man. This is a very serious subject. I'm not going to be making fun. But look, this guy can be entertaining, and he can say the most important things at the same time. There's another one, an Italian chap called Ernesto Ciroli. He made a speech, or not a speech, a talk at a TEDx event in New Zealand. And he's already in his late 50s or something. And he talks about the time when he was younger and he went to Africa. And he talks about the projects that he and some other people that he worked with were doing in Zambia. And he talks so badly about his own projects, but he's saying, well, everything we did was wrong. We killed everything. And he almost didn't smile for 2 minutes while he was delivering joke after joke he was talking about himself. And that worked so well. And it was funny because at the end, he says something like this. He says, well, after I saw what the Americans were doing, after I saw what the French were doing, and after I saw what the English were doing, I felt quite proud of being Italian and doing that. And it was so funny because he was just making fun about himself. Now he's making fun of other people, but still self-deprecating humor. And he doesn't smile. And in the same breath, he moves completely the focus of the presentation to a more serious side that will remain until the end of the presentation. So look, he was able to give a very serious subject with a humorous, a light humor flavor right from the beginning. And you know what? People were completely hypnotized by him. Nobody wanted to do anything else, because people really wanted to listen to this guy. Because again, he used humor from the very beginning. That really worked quite well. And it doesn't have to be, running around the stage. It doesn't have to be overly enthusiastic, although he was a little bit, this Ernesto Sirolli. But I can assure you, it was an amazing time. So it's actually easy to find. If you go on Google and find Ernesto, as we say it, Sirolli, as Sirolli, and then TED Talk or TEDx Talk, you'll find it immediately. And it's definitely worth watching, especially right there at the beginning when it comes to humor. Yeah. So other things, what are we talking about? When are we talking about stage presence? I guess the most important one by far, but I won't talk about it too much, I think, it's the voice. Of course, because the voice is what makes sure that you communicate. I mean, if you have a voice, obviously, the vocal cords will work, breathe and, sound comes out, which has a meaning. That's what you actually use for the most part to ensure that you carry your message across, right? I mean, it's not going to be the slides. It's not going to be mimicry. It's got to be your voice. Now, I don't know about you, but I know, for example, personally, I know that my voice is a bit monotone. It's boring, to be honest. So we have a few tricks. We have to use a few tricks to make sure that our voice becomes interesting. That the main idea, the main thing that we want to do, of course, is to ensure that the message gets across. Now, how we do it is by doing this. We have to ensure that people will definitely enjoy listening to us, right? Now, everything that I'm talking about, humor and everything, and of course your feelings, your emotions, it has to do with that. You can only get your message across if people have their focus, if people are concentrated and wanting to listen to what you have to say. Now, how do you do it with your voice? Well, I'll just enumerate because it's not that difficult to do if you really set out to do it. But it's basically like this. You have to change 3 things: the volume, the rhythm, and the tone. Now, the volume, what does it mean? Is that sometimes when you are in a live audience, you have to speak really, really high, in a high volume, high pitch, whatever. Some other times you have to lower your voice really, really low to make sure that people will focus then again on you. And you ideally shouldn't spend 10 or 15 or 1 hour, minutes or 1 hour, always in the same volume of voice, whether it's too high or too low, because that's boring. So what you have to do is to go up sometimes and sometimes to go down. You have to add a little bit of drama, right? It doesn't have to be too much. It's whatever you feel comfortable with, but it can't be just the same level all the time. Actually, I see that I'm going left to right or right to left now. I think this camera switches everything back. So you have to carry your voice in a way that people will definitely find interest in. And the main thing about this is that way is not a single way. If you speak too slowly or too quickly, if you have the same monotone voice, if you have the same volume, that doesn't work. So you have to add novelty. You have to be slightly unpredictable sometimes. What does this mean? Is that, again, volume up and down, the rhythm as well. Sometimes you can speak very, very quickly without even having the chance, giving the chance of people in the audience to think. You have to do it really, really quickly. Some of the times you have to add pauses, let people think. And it's this almost like a roller coaster, that if you do this, people will find it interesting, right? It's like, oh, it's changed again. Oh, what's happened? that really works. And of course, everything has to change during this. It's like a roller coaster. Imagine yourself. I don't know, do you like roller coasters, Marhel and David? Right? Maybe not Marhel, I don't know.
No.
You had to ruin that for me. I'm joking. Okay, Marhel, what about you?
What did you say? What was the question?
Roller coasters? No, going to the fairground and roller coasters? It's like a Russian mountain, go up and down, left and right.
Oh no, I hate it. I hate it.
But
I hate it.
When it comes
I hate it. I hate it. I love it and I hate it all at the same time. I scream as hell, when I'm there.
It's that sense of danger. But when it comes to speeches, this metaphor will actually hold, because if you change these things, again, volume, rhythm, and tone, that means that you get people be interested and think, oh, this is a ride, this is fantastic. If you have the same thing, like imagine if you're driving at the same speed without having a bend in a curve, without having any close by objects that can serve as a reference, so it doesn't add to the sense of speed, then you'll agree with me that it's quite boring, right? It's like driving, like if you're driving on a road that's just completely straight ahead, it's boring after a while. I mean, you'll find it fantastic because you'll hardly ever see that, but after a while that novelty will go away, right? So what we do is, using that metaphor, we use the equivalent of lift and cruise, and the time when you go up and then you start going, oh my God, this is going to be really dangerous, and then you go down again. If you do this, if you add this kind of interest, that will work. One way that it will work is by asking questions, right? If you ask questions to the public, whether they are real questions or whether they are rhetorical questions where you're just asking them, you're not really expecting for an answer, right? So what will happen? People, well, first of all, you're with yourself. Your voice, if you ask a question, the intonation will go up, right? Actually, by the way, is this going left or right to you? If I do it this way, is that left or right for you?
That's right.
Right. Okay, good. So I'll do it. Because when we are in front of the public, we do it the other way around, but here, because the camera is switched the other way around, I can do it normally. Good. So the point is, if you make so let's go back a bit. If you make pauses, if you make all these things, that will definitely add interest. If you ask a question, your intonation goes up, you make a pause, and then you wait a little bit longer, even if it's not for people to answer, whether it's just a rhetoric, okay? And then what will happen is that you will carry on. So that will add interest to your talk, to the way that you speak. I found myself, because I did this on purpose many times, that I found that my voice was monotone. People were becoming bored with me. So when I changed the way that I speak, even if I think that I'm overdoing it, people will like it. So we have to keep trying that. Sometimes we think, oh, it's too much, and other people, no, still not enough. We have to do a little bit more. Okay. The other thing, of course, with voice is that we have to be economical with the words. It's, unless you're, of course, doing, telling a story, a tale, or a poem, we should actually look at spending the least number of words possible. Why? Well, to make it simple, to make it less complex for people to understand your message, to make sure that you don't lose yourself in the details of the presentation of what you're talking about, because it's easy for you, if you're used to saying many words, that you'll find, you grab a little thing and then you start pulling it. All of a sudden, it's just too much, and then you're completely off the charts. You don't know what you were going to say next, right? So if we make a point about being economical with the words that we use, that's easy for people to understand. So sometimes you make a point once and that's it. You don't have to say it a third or a fourth or a fifth time. It's just useless, right? What does it mean? The next step, of course, is to completely and ruthlessly eliminate all kinds of crutches. So there are a few words that we use sometimes, and we know what those are. I mean, sometimes they're not even words, they're just sounds, like those ahs that we know about, the so's and the justs and the okays, and there are so many of them. I mean, and they also change from language to language. I know that I've already used a few crutches because I'm not so used to speaking in English, doing this kind of presentation in English as I am in Portuguese, for example. So if I'm doing it in my own mother tongue, then it's easier for me to get control over that and not doing it, not saying those words. But then I change to a different language, and then it's becomes harder, right? It becomes harder for me to remember, okay, so what are the words that I say the most in other languages? How can I go about eliminating them completely? So if we are going to speak in a different language than our mother tongue, it's something that we almost need to do that at least for ourselves. Now, I'm not going to go into much more detail about those crutches, those verbal crutches. We know what they are, right? But we need to ruthlessly take them down one by one. There's no way that they can add anything to our speeches if you keep using them. It just doesn't make any sense. You're going to say something, David?
No, it's okay.
Okay. So again, remember to finish this bit. Voice is probably, or not probably, definitely the most important instrument you have at your disposal to get your message across. So make sure that you are, you're well drunk, you drink your water and you're well hydrated, that you feel that your mouth can be capable of saying these things, that you breathe well. If you breathe from your lungs, it means that the breath will be shallow and that you'll keep having to breathe back, breathe in again, over and over again. After a while, you'll become tired, you'll become tense because you'll notice that your breath is very shallow. But if you breathe from your tummy, then it just means that there's a lot more air that goes into the lungs, and then you can speak for longer, and then you can still have that enthusiasm. That will work. That will definitely work. Yeah. Okay. So would you guys want to venture? What would be the next almost as important as the voice when it comes to stage presence? Would you like to take a guess? And we'll see if we agree. No? Okay, I'll go on.
I would say eyes.
Your eyes, exactly. Yeah, Marcel, perfect. Eye contact. Yes. No, imagine that I was talking to you in person. I mean, it's not so bad in video because we know that sometimes we're looking at somewhere else, but still it's not a very good idea. But imagine that if I were talking to you personally, face to face, physically present, but if instead of me looking at you right in the eyes, I would be looking somewhere else, but still talking to you. That would be very, very weird, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm looking at everywhere but you. That would be, you would think, oh, this person is strange. Would you trust this person? I mean, probably you would after a while, but that takes a lot of work, right? So eye contact is the way that you can make sure that you are focusing on the audience, in the public, and the public will respond by doing the same. Now, if you are looking at the public, most of the time the public will also look at you, unless of course it's past midday, everybody's sleepy, it can happen. But most of the times, if you are looking at the public will look at you, and then you will be able to understand where the public is, if they're thinking it's interesting, if they're you still have their attention. So if you have this, you will be able to better have a better control over your presentation, of your speech, right? You'll be able to see exactly where the public is. You'll be able to notice one person who has fallen asleep. Don't worry, look at them. Everybody else, don't notice that person. I mean, it's their problem if they've fallen asleep. It's not your problem, right? So if you don't look at the public, you just lose the public. So if you look, I mean, if you look at the public right in the eyes, they will follow you back, and you'll see if they are listening to you. I'll say this again. If you look people in the eyes, you will see if they are listening to you. So you can see this kind of two different senses together, like vision and auditory sense. So this, again, looking at people will ensure that people are having attention. You still have their attention. And that's paramount, you know, if you want to carry on with the presentation as it is, or if you need to do something different, right? So if you don't look, of course, people will think you're not in full control, you don't feel at ease. It's very difficult for you to be credible. It's very difficult for you to be persuasive. It's very, very hard to be enthusiastic and passionate if you're not looking at people. If you're not looking at people, you know, the public will never think of these that you have these good qualities. So it's definitely a good idea if you develop that bit in yourself. Now, one way that I do when I'm doing coaching with the presenters is this. I usually, when I tell them to look at the public, I tell them to look at the public without stopping, ever. So wherever they're saying, they'll look at one person or another or another or another, but they will never look at the floor. They will never look at the ceiling or to the upper left or upper right corner. It doesn't matter. You don't look anywhere else. Some people sometimes look beyond the public. They will look to the windows or to the door. And you know that the impression that people have is, oh, this person is dying to get out of here. This person is definitely not at ease. So if that person is not at ease, how can that person convince the public of this idea, this proposal, this project? The simple question is actually simplistic question is answer to this is they can't. Of course, sometimes they can, but the point is the probability of that happening is much, much lower. So you have to work extra hard in other dimensions of your performance if you really want to convince people. So what happens, for example, if you forgot your train of thought, you don't know what you're going to say next. You know, I'll tell you what you shouldn't say immediately, or you shouldn't do immediately, because most people do that. Some people who sometimes forget what they were going to say next, they'll become very thoughtful. They'll look at the floor. Sometimes they'll pace back and forward, and they'll be like, making huge sounds. And sometimes they will even say, sorry, I forgot where I was. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say next. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Well, you don't do that. Instead, try doing this. There's a way to avoid this kind of situation. And the way is this. You look at people in the eyes. If you realize that you don't know what you're going to say next, keep looking at people in their eyes. Even if you make a pause of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, that will be enough. If you do that, nobody, I can assure you, nobody will think that you forgot what you were going to say next. And then in a few seconds, your train of thought will come back. You can actually even tell a story or a joke that you have pre-prepared that is somehow related to the theme of the presentation. So imagine this. Imagine that you've just forgotten where you were. You look at people, still look at them in the eyes, a little bit here, a little bit there, make some expressions with your face. Smile, why not smile? And then, you know, I have a story for you. I can't forget to say this to you. And then you give you a story. I'll tell you what, after a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10, maybe 20, that line of thought will come back to you. Your brain has played a trick on you. It's the same brain that will now save you by putting the line of thought immediately in front of you. And then when that happens, finish that story, and then, oh, as I was saying, and then you can carry on. But never, ever take your eye contact away from the public. And I'll give you an example. Do you remember Anna Isabel, who used to be the district director, right? So what I'm going to say next, she's okay with this, because I know that I confirmed with her that this is okay to say this. A few years ago, I think it was a good few years ago, I think 2013 or 2014, I went to her club where she was, and she was telling a story, an amazing story of her childhood, or I don't know, to be honest, if it was invented partially or totally, but it was a story, a personal, an individual story. And at some point, she completely stops completely stops talking. And she looks at us. She keeps on looking at everyone in the public, and she smiles. She makes some faces like, And I can assure you, of those 30 people that were in there, nobody thought it was a blank, that she had forgotten what she was going to say next. And after a few seconds, I look at my watch and think, okay, so a few seconds have already gone by. I start looking, and literally, I can assure you this, I'll swear on my mother, she made a pause of 30 seconds and people still didn't believe it was, something, unexpected. Everybody thought that this was part of the story. And after those 30 seconds, she made a huge mistake, I think, which was to actually say, "Oh, sorry, I had a blank. I don't know what to say next. So please give me a few more seconds." And this is when her facade completely broke down, and she was like, looking at the floor. But at this point, we all thought, "Oh, we've been tricked. Come on." But look, 30 seconds of a pause in a speech. Who else has heard about this? Especially that everybody thought that it wasn't, it was on purpose. It was planned. That was an amazing moment. I will never forget that. I wrote a book and actually made a point of including that story without saying her name, but she said, no, Robert, you can put my name, but I didn't. And I decided not to. But, it was funny because at the end, eventually a few weeks later, she came to a different club and she did the story again because she felt that she needed to do it again without the big pause. But the point here is you can get away with something like that if you keep looking at people, if you keep being, having expressions in your face. And so will save you from lots of situations. But most of the times you don't even go that far. It's just like in a regular conversation. Just look at people and, people look back and that's it. But you don't have to focus too often. Okay, so actually not too often, that's not the word. You shouldn't focus for too long in the same person. Now there's a limit. Usually people say, some specialists say it's about 3 seconds. So look at one person individually for 3 seconds, no more than 3 seconds, and then another person, no more than 3 seconds, and then another person, and so on. And they keep on moving in a very chaotic way. It's not a checklist where you say, you do A, B, C, and D, and so on. You don't do that, right? What you do is, you have to be acting as naturally as possible. When that happens, you have the public in your hand. It's just it. It just works. The other thing is, of course, look at different people all the time. Because what I'm saying 2 things, which will become a 3rd thing. So first thing is, always look at people. Second is, don't look for too long. And third, obviously, is that means that you have to keep changing the focus, right? Don't look at the same person for too long. If you do that, that person will feel, awkward. And that person will feel that they are the only focus of attention of your attention while you're speaking. And they will feel like, oh my God, this is really uncomfortable. I don't want to be here, correct? And I'm sure we've all seen this kind of thing, but it's something that we as speakers should definitely avoid. So ideally between 1, 2, and no more than 3 seconds per person here and there, but always moving and never, ever looking at anything else, right? Of course, quick exception. If you are changing a slide, of course, you're allowed to look at the slide momentarily, right? If there's a distraction, a nuisance, a noise, of course, you look there. It's not just, you can't just carry on. I'm talking about while you're talking, while you have the full command, don't look at anybody else. You should always keep looking at the public. One more thing. Don't worry too much about looking at absolutely everyone. If people stay too much, in the too far away from you in either left or right, or at the top, people will understand that you don't have to keep looking at them. Look at them once or twice during your presentation, but focus the main point of your attention in the middle, in the front middle, and then towards a triangle towards the back. Because if you do that, most people will feel included, and that's the main thing. That's the main thing that you want to do, right? Is there anything that you guys would like to share before we go on? Does this make sense to you? Or do you think it's too much looking at the people without interruption? No? Okay. So the next thing is one of the hardest. It's body movement. So what should you do with your hands and with your feet? How should we move about? And that's really important because here you have a very narrow, let's say, a very narrow amplitude where you could be sometimes being taken for being too enthusiastic or not enthusiastic enough. So there's a kind of a narrow band of what we call, effective communication, effective body language. So you don't want to be too much, but it can't be too low. If you do either, then it's not going to help you. So my point here, the main point is, you have to make gestures, whether they are with your hands, with your feet, with your movements, which are controlled, I would say think about melody, about harmonious gestures. Because sometimes people are completely, completely closed on themselves, and sometimes they move really quickly. And that's weird because people in the public will think, oh, this is so difficult for me to follow this person because I never know what to expect next. But this person is so sometimes so closed on herself or himself, and then all of a sudden they move about so quickly. Then it's like, oh my, it's just too much. It's just too much of an amplitude. So we have to be careful about that. So what we should do? Let's start with the hands. So with the hands, this one of the first rules is you should most of the times or all the time should show your hands. Keep your hands in sight. So that takes away, for example, the way that you should definitely not cross your arms, even if you're waiting for questions and answers. Don't do that. Don't put your hands in your pockets. Don't put, even worse, the hands behind you, in your behind pockets, right in the back, because that means that you're not showing them. It's like, oh, there's an incomplete person there, and people, whether they like it or not, if they see a hand, they will feel more at ease. They will think, oh yes, this person is trustworthy. If you're showing your hands, if I were talking to you like this all the time without moving my hands, this would be quite strange. It would be like, for you, I'll be just like a talking head. Let's try doing this for the next few minutes. If I keep doing this, and if you just see a talking head, or sometimes a head that talks but doesn't even move, that it's death. It's really difficult to come out of this situation. And then some people realize, oh my God, I'm not moving my hands, and all of a sudden they're moving their hands too much. So be careful about that. Don't do anything too quickly, too abruptly, too sharply. No, just think about melody and harmony, right? So what else can we do? Well, we should avoid boredom, of course. And one of the things that we do that really bothers people is symmetry. I mean, symmetry is beautiful. We like beautiful people, and we think that the symmetrical face is the face of a beautiful person. So sometimes we feel that we should always have our hands like this, left and right. I mean, the hands are always like this, and when they go up again, they also, as well, they also have to be together, and it's like this all the time. And look, it just becomes boring. So how can we move our hands in order for them not to become boring? It's to break that. For example, you can have your hands. I'm putting them too highly here, but you could have your hands like this in the front of your tummy, right? So not here, but in front of your tummy, and then move. One of the hands stays there, and the other one hand will move, right? And then the opposite. Sometimes you show you the palms of your hands, which is good. Some other times you close them, close them close to you. So you have to make sure that the movements will also agree with the message. I'll give you a couple of examples. So again, ways of not being boring with your hands. There was this talk by Colin Powell. He's a retired Army general he was actually the Secretary of State in the US. And he did his TED talk a few years ago. And it was really funny because he said it in the beginning, well, I have, when I go to schools and I talk to 5 and 7-year-olds, and when he does this, let me change my perspective here a little bit. When he does this. When I talk to 5 and 7-year-olds and he does this, his hand like this, and people will understand immediately, oh, because his hand is lower, he's talking about little ones, right? It's like he's repeating the same message, but with body language. For example, sometimes when he says, there was a point when he says, well, we did a video that went viral. And instead of just doing this, we did a video that went viral. It is this. We did a video that went viral. See what I'm doing here? It's like, it's like a basketball falling to the ground. Like, and that people will realize that almost every syllable that is said, we did a video that went viral. It had a movement like this. So when I'm helping other people, when I'm creating my own speeches, and when I'm helping other people to create their own speeches, I found this amazing way to ensure that you have very diverse hand movements while you're talking. And it goes like this. You're going to write your speech, right? On Word or Excel, whatever, or on a page. So it just looks like this. You have a blank page, just do something like this, just align up the top, all the way. On the left, you write your message. in paragraphs on the right, you will definitely describe what kind of message, what kind of movements you're going to do with your hands when you say those things. Now, why is this important? Because most of the times we'll forget. Well, I know, we might forget. We might even forget some words that will be different, but this will make our brain think about hand movements at the same time that we're preparing the speech. That's a huge change. This will definitely work hard. It will work quite well in order for you to remember when you are on stage, how you should move your hands. If we do this, I won't say completely assure you, but I think it will become very obvious to you that you'll become more loose with your movements. You'll be okay. You'll find that, again, you'll have more melodious and more harmonious movements than if you were trying to remember this as you went along. So when you prepare your speech, if you find, okay, let's do it the other way around. If you find that you have some difficulties moving your hands, do this. While you are preparing your speech, prepare your speech together with the hand movements. Write exactly what you want in each column. And I can assure you, or again, the probability is quite high that you will remember where you were, what you're going to say, and also that you're going to remember what you're going to move, how you're going to move your hands, okay? Even if you're still going to focus on the content, that will definitely help. Now, one level one thing we have already talked about is the level of enthusiasm. Now, if you drop your hands too much, if you drop them by your sides, it may be on purpose, because after all, this has to do with body language. But if you don't do it on purpose, I mean, if this is not prepared, then it looks like your energy is going down too much. So be careful. When you do that, if you do it consciously, that's fine. But if you don't do it consciously, if you spend most of your speech with your hands just besides you, they will be, lower than your hips. People will feel that there's a lack of energy. Okay, now the other way around. If you use your hands above your shoulder, above your collarbones, above this area, that means that it's maybe too much energy. So you have to be careful. Ideally, your hands should be in front of your chest or your tummy at some distance. So they should be here. They shouldn't be here in the tummy. They should be at some distance. That will be work a lot better to making sure that it doesn't become a distraction. So other things, don't put your hands on your face unless, of course, you want to say, oh yeah, I was so annoyed with that. Yeah, of course, if you want to be overly dramatic, you can do it, right? If you want to show that you were ashamed, oh my God, I was so ashamed of this. But if you don't do it consciously, sometimes I've seen people who are with their hands all the time in here, or mostly men, usually scratch their chin or their mouth on the side, or their nose, or their eyebrow, or they go here to the back of the head. There's always something to scratch. And it's okay if you do it once, but if it's not okay if you do it continuously. It's a crutch as well, right? So you want to avoid that. You want to avoid doing any kind of repetitive movement. Now, one thing, for example, for whoever has long hair and the hair goes in front of your ear, everybody usually says, oh, don't put your hand behind, your hair behind your ear, because you're doing it all the time. It's not, it's not a good movement anyway. Don't do it just even once. Don't do it. Well, I have a different opinion about this. I mean, yes, definitely we shouldn't do it too much, but doing it once or twice, that's absolutely fine. But it's important how you do it. Now, for example, can you see the difference between the moment when you have your hair in front of your ear and you don't look at the public for a fraction of a second, and then very quickly you put your hair behind your ear, and then you come back to the public? That is so different from slowly moving your hair and still looking at the people, do it like this slowly, and more than one person. That is total control. That is charisma on stage. Look, it's almost the same movement, but you're looking at the public and you're doing it slowly, harmoniously. Now, don't do it 30 times harmoniously. Don't do it. It's still repetitive. But a few times, it's absolutely fine. And in fact, it might win even more. It will look even better on stage, right? So it's absolutely fine. Of course, the main thing here is don't overdo it. Don't overdo it when it comes to drama. Don't overdo it when it comes to not thinking about what you're doing. That's the main thing here. I'm just looking at my checklist right now. Yes, exactly. Okay. I think this is most that we have to do the hands. Oh, there's one more thing. Sometimes when you have, be sure you have some, a wedding ring or have something in your fingers, it becomes a point of distraction. So even either men or women, sometimes we start moving with our wedding rings, and that becomes a bit weird. It's something that we should avoid, because ideally you should show that you have full control again, that you are completely at ease. But if you are moving something, in a very nervous way, you're not going to give the best image to the public, right? That doesn't work very well. The other thing is, any movement that you have, or when you have a position to rest your hands, don't do it like this. Any kind of stress-induced movements or position, like this, for example, either like this or like this, it's too much. Sometimes it's summer and people still see the whites in their knuckles because you were so nervous, and then people see that. People notice the kind of low energy or bad energy that you're putting across. So instead, just keeping your hands separate, or sometimes if you want to keep them together, just look like this, and not in front of your chest, but in front of your tummy, like this, as relaxed as possible, and that will be absolutely fine. And it's as long as the hands don't stay in front of your face, because that's what people want to see. That's the main focus. That will be absolutely fine. Okay. Does this make sense to you? Would you like to add any more comments or any problems that you have that you'd like to share, and let's see if we can help you out? No? Okay. Oh yeah, Maja.
No, I was just thinking that it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's very helpful to remember. Sometimes I think we just take it, we just think this is so easy to do it, but I really appreciate that the tool, about the message content and the description of the movements to it. I think this is a fantastic way of avoiding scratches,
yeah,
and actually pushing yourself forward and becoming a leader and speaker. So it's fantastic. Thank you.
No, this is not so natural, because if we are talking with our friends, then it's easy. We don't have to worry too much about our hands. If you are sitting down, you don't have to worry too much about our hands. But if you are the center of attention, there's nobody else in the public, in the stage from you, apart from you, it looks like everybody's looking at every single thing we're doing. And it's true in a sense, but we shouldn't be too overly concerned about that. We shouldn't really be concerned to a point where we start becoming very, tense. That doesn't work. It doesn't help us at all. Okay. A couple more things. Let's talk about feet. What should we do about feet? Now, this is something I have big problems about something about Toastmasters here. I'll be completely open. I absolutely hate, almost without exception, almost. So there are exceptions. That thing about, oh, you have to use the whole stage. Oh, come on. Just too much. Sometimes you have to run everywhere. What about if you're doing a serious speech with a serious message? Do you have to go everywhere? Okay, maybe you can sometimes, but sometimes we don't really have to, and we're just getting ourselves tired too much. And I'll tell you what, if you walk too much on stage, you know what's going to happen? That people will not focus on you correctly. You'll always be moving and people will follow you. And while you're speaking, that means most probably that they will not be listening to you correctly. Why? Because again, this is another example where, a while ago I gave an example where if you look at the people, look at the public, you will see that they're listening to you. This is it's quite similar in the sense that if you make it difficult for the public to follow you with their eyes, you're also making it difficult for the public to follow you with their ears, and they won't hear you. So what can we do about this, about movement? It's actually rather simple. We should move, we should walk just in those times when we are connecting different parts of the speech. A few steps here, stop, a few steps there, and you stop. But you can't be doing that movement about going 2 steps left, 2 steps right, 2 steps left, 2 steps right. It's just boring. And it looks like you're in a complete mess. Even worse. I mean, even worse than doing left and right is going back and forwards. Sometimes when you have a stage where there is no stage, basically we are on the same level as the first row of the public, we give 2 steps or 3 steps in front, and then we are too close to the public, and then we realize, oh my God, this is too close. Let's go back. So we go back a bit, 2 or 3 steps again, and then, oh, we're too far. And then we go farther again. And it's like this, all the presentation for a quarter of an hour, 1 hour. And there's this person who's really close and far, close and far. And then what happens is we don't listen to what this person has to say. It's difficult because they're invading our personal space. We shouldn't do it at all. So what can we do? Simple. First, you only move, again, while you are saying something that is not too important, it's just a connection, you know, it's like a transition to different parts of the speech. While you are saying something that is really important, you should stop. Stop right where you are. I'll tell you how to stop in a second, but you have to be quiet, or not be quiet, but be still while you're saying something really important. Also because that will add not just to the attention, but also to the drama. You've been walking, all of a sudden you stop. You stopped. Okay, let's see what he's got to say. That works very effectively. While you're stopped, how should you stop? Well, stopping itself is easy. The thing is, how should you be still? It's actually rather simple. First, you put your feet just slightly apart, no more than the shoulders. So not too far, not too close. And then you put your face across you make the direction of your face or facing the middle of the public. So then you can easily switch to the left or switch to the right, and people will listen to you, will hear you. You can see them, they can see you, that's fine. You're still. And that's what's really important. That's much more important than walking all around all the time. It's just, if you're walking around all the time, you get tired, you'll have probably to drink more, you'll have difficult even with eye contact, because if you're walking all the time, it's difficult to have 1 or 2 or 3 seconds to look at the people, right? So the thing is that if you walk, if you decide to stop, then what happens is that, of course, you'll have more attention from the public. The public will give you not just their attention, but they will definitely listen to you, and you'll have more time for yourself. You won't be distracted. Okay, what else? When it comes to the feet and when it comes to standing, be aware that one of the very best things you should do is to put the weight of your torso and your head and your arms equally well on both sides of both legs. So some people just put all their weight on one leg, which will become very tense, and the other leg will be like this, and then they'll change to the other one, and they'll be changing like this all the time. It's like this. They could be still, but moving left and right and left and right. It's just weird. And sometimes it just shows too much that this person is too much at ease, and we don't want that. We want to be taken seriously and be credible. And in order to do that, people will need to realize that yes, we've prepared this, that yes, we are in control of our body and our voice and the message. But by doing this, by putting too much weight, putting the whole weight in one leg, which then your brains will think, oh, this is painful, let's change to the other one, and then keep moving. After a while, it's just too much, even mostly for yourself rather than the public, but that doesn't help. The other thing is, when you're walking, sometimes people walk like they wobble on stage. I don't know why, but it seems like when we are on stage, it feels like people have forgotten how to walk. It's like people walk like this and then put one feet in front of the other, and then the other, and then the other, and then the other. And it's like wobbling while they're walking. Have you seen this? I mean, it's just, I don't know why. Why can't you just walk normally? We just give 2 or 3 steps one way, and then we stop, finish the sentence, the really important thing, then we move to another way. And we'll going that way, we'll also look at those people, stop after a few paces, then we stop, and then we do The other thing again, we'll come back to the middle or something. But what you shouldn't do is walk in a way that is weird for the public. Sometimes we're standing and you put the whole weight on one leg and the other foot, instead of being right in the floor, we just put the other foot will go to the back like this, like putting your foot behind your leg. And again, it's just too strange. It's distracting. So my suggestion is don't do that at all. One extra point that I would like to make, and this is mostly for women, but I know that some men will do it, although it's much rarer, is that while you are standing, you should stand with the legs should be completely apart like that. I mean, just the feet just slightly apart. Many people, especially women, will put will cross their legs while they're standing, like this, right? It's like a very defensive position, and you're betraying your state of mind, which is being nervous. Now, if you're trying to be nervous, then that's fine. If you want to show that you're nervous, that's fine. But I would guess that most people don't do that. Most people want to give an impression of being cool, calm, and collected. And twisting your legs while you are standing, it's not the way of doing that. If you are doing a pitch, I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to get your investment, your money, or you're not going to be selling anything. It's really, really hard to go over this position. So the point is, if you want to say something really important, stay still, feet just slightly apart, not too close, not too far apart, just slightly apart. Look at the people, put your weight on both legs, and I can assure you, even for 2 or 3 minutes, it will be fine like this. If you are like this, it will be absolutely fine. And walk only when you know that you can walk, that it's not a big deal if you do that, right? So that will make a huge, huge difference to the way that you look to the public. And looking at the public, that's quite important. There's one thing that has to do with eye contact and movement that I haven't told you about, which is actually facing the public. One of the things that we should never do, or there's always exceptions, but we should try not to, is to look to the slides, for example, for a very long time, if you have slides. Is to not face the public. For example, if you are on a lectern, and then sometimes some people will just put their elbow on the lectern and they will look somewhere else, not the public. And for example, when you have too much text on the slides, most of the times we are tempted to look back to the slides and read from the slides. And okay, first of all, you should never have too much text on the slides unless it's absolutely essential. For example, if you want to write a rule or a law or something, if you want to make sure that people will know exactly what the text is. But if that's not the point, if you don't put too much text, because it's difficult for people to follow. Now, if you put text really, text that's literally like the text, like a book, what's going to happen is that, first of all, people will look at the slides, not at you. They won't be able to read it thoroughly. They will read it really quickly. They will get to the end, and then they will become very frustrated if you're looking at the slides, because they will read quickly, not well, but they will read quickly. While we're still in the first paragraph, they're probably already finished. So when you have slides, even if you don't have text, there are two big mistakes that many people make. One of them is you're always looking at the slides. For example, you haven't changed the slide in a long while. You still have the remote control with you. You know that you haven't changed the slide, but you keep looking at it sometimes. You look at, oh yeah, I'm talking about that, and then you look at the public. And then again, look at the slide, then look at the public. But the slide hasn't changed. There's no reason why you should look at the slide instead of looking at the public. No, how can you do this? It's simple. If you just change the slide once, you just look at the slide once as well. The rest, if you want to direct the attention of the public to the slide, instead of looking at yourself to the slide, you do this. Just use your hand, like asking for a lift. Looking at the slide behind me, as you can see, for example, that's it. Or you do it, for example, like this. As you can see behind me, right? Don't do this thing about going to the side of the slide too often and say, oh, yeah, as you can see this. And if you do it too often, it's just too much, right? I mean, okay, sometimes it's okay because you have to chart or a graph or something like that. You need to really ensure that that happens. But if you do it too often, it's just too distracting. So the idea is you stay where you are, or you can sometimes walk in. Are you seeing this? And then you walk. Are you seeing this? Can you believe this? Can you believe this number, this fact, this story? Remember, going back to how what I told earlier, this will really help people, follow you as a speaker, not just the slides, but yourself. If people wanted the slides, you could just email them the slides. You wouldn't need it just the slides. I mean, I'm sure you should be able to do the presentation even without them. You're the one, as a speaker, who needs to be in the center of the attention and not the slides. Which comes back now going back to the second big mistake that many people do when they are showing slides, which is standing to the side. I'll do this like this. So for example, imagine that all this bookshelf, instead of being a bookshelf, would be a slide, right? So many people stand on the side like this. So as you can see, as I'm showing here, and they're completely to the side where there's nobody there, but they're showing there. But they're looking at like this and like that. They're stopped, they're still, that's fine. But instead of turning themselves to the public, no, they're turning themselves to the point at them, but should never take your attention, your focus away from there and put it on to the instead of focusing on the public. Always face the public, not the slides. Okay. Do you use slides, Mahel and David? Do you usually do slides when, for example, you're doing work presentations or stuff like that?
Well, I use it continuously, to be honest. I have to make a lot of presentations, but they are technical presentations, and sometimes you have to explain some charts and some complicated, so you need to pinpoint the charts, and it's not so easy to look all the time the audience. It's not easy.
Well, that's one way you can try. One way to lower the number of times that you go to the side of the slides to show them, which is this. Instead of just a chart or a graph, say for example from Excel onto PowerPoint, which will then keep all the tabs, all those lines, like the axes and so on. Make it as simple as possible. If you look online for something called Zen presentations, Zen is Z-E-N, there's a way of showing this same information graphically and beautifully without too much information, without having too many distractions. When that happens, people look at the slide and they will immediately understand it without having to be explained too much. So at that point, I mean, of course, in a presentation, if you want to, you can make all the graphs like that, and sometimes it's not feasible. But when it is, that means that you don't have to be bringing their attention to the slides, and they don't have to go to the side of the slides. You can just be where you are. As you can see this, and that's fine. You just direct their attention very shortly to the slides, and then sometimes you have to move to the side a little bit, but still looking at the public. And that's a huge difference there. And even if you have that, look, if you were to have your laptop in front of you while the projection goes to your back, look at the laptop in front of you instead of looking to the back. So you'll know exactly what it is, and they will know about it. You don't have to be always showing your back to them. That's really not necessary, and it's just too much. It's just kind of that's not harmonious, right? That's not a way of it's not melodious for people to watch it like that. Okay, but of course I do understand that if you have to have slides, sometimes you have to give them more attention than yourself, because there are a few things that are said by images and by graphs that it's not easily said by voice, right? But then this is a suggestion. Describe what the slides, what people should be looking at. I mean, describe what people should interpret from that graph. You can say, as you can see, our sales have increased 20% in last year, and then they could actually be seeing a number of sales from different years, right? And then you just give attention to the last, from last year to this year, for example. You don't have to say that, oh, it's growing a lot since, I don't know, since 1994 and so on. It might be too much, because people will be able to see that if they really want to. You don't have to explain everything to them, right? Just draw the attention to whatever is most important, with the graphical element that you think it's the most important in that slide, and nothing else, and then just carry on. And that will usually work a lot better. And again, make those graphs as simple as possible. And if that happens, I can assure you, you'll have the public with you. If you don't do that, what's going to happen is that people will become a bit frustrated, because you'll have so many series of numbers of data in the screens that it's difficult for them to even make sense of what's in the axis X and Y. What is this? And if people are asking themselves those questions, then the graph is definitely too complicated, too complex, and you want to avoid that. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, David, I would like to tell you that we have a guy here in Bilbao who gave us a workshop. No, can you hear me? Yeah, who gave us a workshop about how to use data to convert it into graphs. Oh, wow. And what were the best graphs to convert specific data. And we have the PowerPoint here in Bilbao, so if you are interested, I can ask him if I can share it with you. And it was really, really helpful to think how can we convert information through graphs, because it's really rather difficult to actually, it's rather, it's like asking too much for the public, to the audience, to actually listen to us at the same time as understanding the graphs. So he was very, very helpful, and I think I will ask him if you like.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Mantel.
Yeah, because I know myself, I hardly use text on my presentations. I normally use a really big picture with a sentence of a keyword in order to convey the message, to remind myself of the content I'm giving. But my presentations are very zen, very minimal. Yes. In general. Yeah.
That's what most of the presentations should be like that, in most contexts. Not all contexts, but most. That will definitely be better, because you want to make them simple. You want to ensure that people will understand what you're saying, and that there's no doubt, there's no ambiguity. And if you have too many elements, people will get distracted. They will not understand what you're saying. And sometimes if they think they will understand, actually they will have misunderstood it. So keep it simple and it will work better, definitely. Okay, of course, not too simple. Otherwise it just, it's still ambiguous in that case. Okay, next point. One thing that definitely doesn't help, again, with some exceptions, but that definitely doesn't help, is if you have notes with you. Now, I've seen all kinds of people taking all kinds of different kinds of reminders of the presentation with them. I've seen, for example, people who write in their hands the main points of their presentation. Sometimes they look at their hands, but you know what? People in the public will see that, and it's like, oh, come on, this guy doesn't know enough about this theme in order to. They have to write 5 words in the hand. Come on. Or sometimes they take a full page. I've seen this, 2 or 3 pages of A4 pages with text, which is basically the whole text of the whole presentation in small type fonts. And then the problem is, of course, they will have it as a crutch during the presentation. At some point, they will need it, and then they will look at the first page. They can find it. They look at the second, can find it, and they give up. And then still holding it, they carry on talking. And you think, oh, come on, it's just so unprofessional to have it this way. But some people do it. Some people think that it's okay to have notes. Well, I think it's only okay to have notes in basically 2 situations. One of them is when you have a speech where you are definitely behind a lectern, you have a written speech and you have to really read a speech. And in which case, of course, the notes will be the speech. I mean, I don't like particularly that kind of speech, but sometimes the situation is more formal and you have to write or to say exactly what was written, nothing else, nothing more. And in this case, that you definitely have to have the notes. The other time is when you are in a table with other people, well, you're making a presentation, but you're sitting down. Then, of course, if you're sitting down, you have a few things here and there. You have your pen, and you have your mobile phone, you have a notepad. In which case, it's okay if you have a little cheater. You know, if you have something that will remind you of the flow of that meeting, it's absolutely fine in that case. It's just that when you are standing without anything near you, having notes will definitely be a detriment. It will not work. Again, you think that the most important thing is content, right? Because you think, oh, content is so important that, but look, if your focus is just on content, if you haven't prepared, if you don't know exactly what you're going to say, of course, it's the content. And then you betray that to saying, okay, I still recognize that the content is extremely important, but I haven't prepared myself so well. And I have this cheat with me. People will think, oh, come on, doesn't this guy know this product or his idea or his argument so well that he has to have all these things with him or with her? Why? You know, that people start asking it explicitly in their own heads. That will undermine your message. So again, this is a question of a time when form will actually stop the content from actually being put across, being communicated to other people. So content is extremely important, absolutely fine. And if you have the notes, they will definitely remind you. But the way that you do it, that's not the best way. So how can we go about doing this? Well, there are many ways. One of them is, if you have the notes in front of you, if you are close to a computer, for example, if you are standing near a table where people are around the table, like in a business meeting, and if you have the PowerPoint with you, if you have it in presenter view, you'll have some notes there. Well, the PowerPoint itself is already good because the PowerPoint usually already has all the content that you are going to talk about. So that helps as well. That counts. There's another way. The best cheat I've ever seen, and that works so well, if it's well trained, of course, is if you could have someone in the audience with your laptop showing you the next slide. So remember, you already know what is the current slide because you're showing it right now. But there's someone who you know that will have your laptop with the same presentation, but they are one slide ahead. So then you see what the next slide is, and you'll be able to better know what you're going to say next. So you won't really need that, having a cheat on with you, or having some notes with you. That will really help. Now, of course, it doesn't mean it can't be seen by anyone, right? I mean, if people see that, you have to make it in a way that nobody sees that. Otherwise, again, you will have a lack of credibility. But in some cases, I've seen people doing this, and they've done it so well that I was surprised. I was thinking, no, they're not going to be able to pull this off, but they were. I think this was really good. So ideally, prepare your presentation as much as possible, rather than go and rehearse it as many times as possible. Some people say, oh yeah, well, that person felt tense, so maybe they rehearsed it too much. It's too well rehearsed. No, that doesn't exist. There's not such thing as too well rehearsed. It's well rehearsed, and when it's well rehearsed, if you keep on rehearsing, it will come out more naturally, not more tense. If something comes out more tense, it just means that you haven't rehearsed enough. So if sometimes you think, oh yeah, I rehearsed 2 times, that's enough. I don't want it to be too well rehearsed. Now, come on. You have to do an extra effort if you want to do something really exciting and unforgettable. That's how you should do it, right? Okay, one more thing. And this is like going back to the beginning of the presentation. We've started this as talking about humor, about the need to start with presentations with humor. So Mahel is leaving us now. Yeah. Thank you, Mahel. Thank you for coming.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I need to.
Okay.
I wrote a little note. I need to go.
We're almost finishing anyway. So if you want to stay for 5 more minutes, no more than that, I can guarantee you can stay. Otherwise, of course, feel free to go.
Bye.
Bye, Manjel. Bye. See you.
So let's carry on, David. So the idea here is, yes, we should start with humor. That would help. We can have humor in the middle, in the end of the speech as well. So we don't necessarily have to start with humor. It's a great way, yes. But there is one way you should definitely not start a presentation. And the way is this. Many people start their presentations with a protocol, like, I would like to thank you for inviting me for this presentation. What a great event it's been. Thank you so much. Congratulations for this initiative and this event, whatever. And then it looks like 5 minutes later, you're still talking about it, right? There are some times when, for example, you, apart from us, thanking the organizers, you also thank the Mr. President or Mrs. Chairman or something like that. And it just takes too much time, too much energy. It looks like you're being polite to these people. And yes, you are being polite to these people, but you're doing it to the expense of everyone else. So imagine that if you have 500 people watching, and there's one president and one chairman, and you're thanking these people, spending 1 or 2 minutes, and then you're actually losing all the other people. The 498 people who are not the president or the chairman will be, oh my God, let's carry on with the presentation. Come on, don't waste time. That way, if we do that, we kind of ruin the rest of the presentation for most people. So we have to think that, again, this is kind of a level of energy that we have to keep high and up and down during the whole presentation, instead of just focusing on the protocol and the content and being so tense about everything else that we forget to do what is basically essentially a performance. Not too theatrical. I'm not saying that it should be too theatrical. Not to show off. It's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, it should be just enough to keep people entertained. People should enjoy that moment. Even if sometimes they don't understand it, they should still be able to enjoy it. Because again, if you have many people in front of you, maybe not everyone will understand what you're saying. Maybe it depends on depending on the kind of event. But if you prepare your speech well, my suggestion is go directly into your story. Go directly into the content of your speech, rather than starting to thank everyone around you. Don't do that. The best metaphor I can come up with is James Bond. And you know how James Bond movies start? It's basically like this. There's cars exploding, the helicopters and the guys in skis and machine guns and explosions, everything. And only after a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, maybe only after a few minutes, we'll start finally having the credits, the opening credits. When that happens, you finally, oh yeah, of course it's a James Bond movie. We've started it. And that works. And it's just not in cinema. That works because sometimes, as we've seen, for example, in speeches in Toastmasters, when we are in contests, sometimes we start the speech, and then it's only after a while that you say, Madam Chairman or Madam Chairperson or whatever, Mr. Toastmaster, dear public. That only happens after some time, after maybe a few seconds or maybe after minutes. So it's not necessary, and I would completely discourage you from starting your presentation with regular protocol. That's a kill, a complete kill of enthusiasm, and you should have definitely not do it. So we're nearing the end, and I would just like to say this, David and everybody else who's watching this back home, all these factors, they will add up. They themselves won't do the presentation, right? They will add up, they will help with the presentation. They will not replace the content. That's not the point. What we're trying to do is to get the content to be well understood and well, the focus of the public, of the attention of the public, rather than anything else. Now notice, even if you do all of these correctly, it might still fail, because we're not talking about certainty. We're talking about probability. If you do these things well, the probability of success is much higher. But it doesn't mean that it's completely certain that you'll have total success. You have to keep doing it. As you are Toastmasters, you know how it is. You have to keep going to the Toastmasters meetings. You have to train a lot. You have to rehearse. You have to perhaps record yourself on your mobile phone, or give the presentations to friends who are not completely at ease with the theme or with the concept of Toastmasters, and ask for their opinion. Once that happens, it's much better. It's much more probable that you'll have success in your presentations, right? I think this is the last message from me is ensure that you do the best you can every single time. If you do one little bit different, one little bit different, better from every presentation, from one to the next, to the next, to the next, that means that after a while, you'll be a much, much better performer or public presenter or, a speech, a speaker, a really live speaker. You'll be much better doing what you do. And the most important thing is your ideas, your content will come across and people will enjoy you and enjoy that from you. And they will definitely appreciate you doing that.
Thank you very much, Norberto. It was really a great summary because it was a lot of content. I think you went through all the points relevant to good speech, how to make a good speech. And for me, it was very interesting what you said. We remember, or the audience or the people remember how they felt, and maybe they don't remember what you said, but remember they remember the feelings, and I think this is a key point we cannot forget. So thank you very much, Norberto.
David, I will send you the script of this presentation, just a huge checklist, and I hope this will help. Everybody else who's listening to this, who's looking at this, if you'd like to have it as well, just send me an email. My email is so simple, it's N from Norberto, and then my surname, Amaral, A-M-A-R-A-L, so N-A-M-A-R-A-L @gmail.com, and I'll send it to you right away.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye, David.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.